Hello, and welcome back to the Stupid Stuff Book Club. I'm your host, Tan the Tan Man, and today we'll be continuing The Accidental Hero by Matt McClush. Today we'll be reading chapters 5, 6, and 7. If you haven't yet, please do check out our previous episodes, which are covering our first episode covers chapter 1 and 2, including the prologue. And then, episode 2 covers chapters 3 and 4. So we will now begin with chapter 5, Dedication Day. The next morning, Jack awoke to find a man sitting outside his window. As if seeing a man sitting outside of a window on the 437th floor wasn't strange enough, this man appeared to be sitting on the air itself. He had an orange-white glow emanating from his body, and a ring of red energy particles swirling around him. He appeared to be an Indian man, and had a clean-shaven head that was decorated with 5 or 6 lines of red henna paint on his dark brown skin. The stripes were drawn from the back of his head to the front, running toward a single red dot in the center of his forehead. Jack moved over to the window and opened it. The man's eyes were closed, and he was humming gently with his arms outstretched. "Hello?" Jack said. "Can I help you?" The man didn't hear Jack at first. He sat there with his legs folded, humming away. He was barefoot, dressed in loose-fitting bright orange clothing, with a crimson silk belt tied around his waist, and a matching red sash slung over his shoulder. He opened his eyes to find Jack staring at him.
"Oh, hello,"
he said, eyeing Jack's messed up, mangled morning hair. He had a deep, rich voice. The accent was a mixture of English and Indian, sounding both comforting and wise.
"Did my meditations rouse you from your slumber? Forgive me, young friend. That was not my intention."
Jack was a bit surprised to receive such a neighborly reaction, but he certainly wasn't complaining. It was a nice way to start the day after getting off to such a rocky start the night before. "It's okay," Jack said. He rubbed his head, and trying in vain to get a cowlick to lie down. "It was about time for me to get up anyway. Besides, I've never seen anyone meditate 400 floors up before. That's kinda cool."
"It's how I welcome each new day," the man said, looking out on a glorious city morning. "A day such as this should never be wasted, not even for a minute. I trust this morning finds you well."
"We'll see," Jack said, still slightly wary of each new person he met in Empire City. "You're not going to start screaming and run away or try to dissect me or anything, are you?" The man's back straightened.
"Dissect you? What an odd thing to say,"
He replied, somewhat confused.
"That also is not my intention."
Jack pointed to a billboard that was puttering by with his face stretched across a high-definition screen. The scrolling headlines questioned whether Jack was an evil spy, a supervillain, or both. "Sounds about right to me," Jack said. "I'm not exactly normal, even for this place."
"Why would you ever want to be normal?"
The floating man asked with a laugh.
To try and be normal in Empire City would be abnormal. Normal is boring. Differences inspire. Every now and then, there comes a person so incredibly different that everyone normal wishes they were different in the exact same way.
Jack nodded. "I never thought of it like that,"
You should try."
the man said, returning to his meditations. "Jack, who are you talking to?" Jack turned around to see Jason standing at the threshold of his door. Before Jack could answer him, there was a flash of light behind him, and he spun back around to find the man in orange was gone. In his place, there was only a spinning mass of energy particles shrinking into an ever-tightening spiral until they vanished from sight. Jack shrugged. It was probably nothing out of the ordinary for this place. Just another day in the city. "I don't know," Jack said. "No one, I guess." Jason nodded. "We've got a big day ahead of us, Jack. Better get started. How do you feel about breakfast? I've got 2.7 million recipes in my memory bank, you know?" Jack's stomach growled. Breakfast sounds great. Jason led Jack downstairs to the kitchen, where appliances were already springing to life and preparing an exotic breakfast filled with foods Jack had never seen or even heard of. In the morning light, Jack got his first good look at Jason's apartment, a spectacular open-air loft space. Throughout the loft, steps were suspended in midair, leading up and down to anti-gravity platforms that supported a kitchen, living room, and multiple game rooms on separate floating stages. Everything had a sleek, futuristic design, light on the furniture and heavy on glass and steel. This is some place, Jack told Jason, ogling the apartment. Perks of the job, Jason replied. Loft space in the ivory tower gets rented out at 5,000 credits a month, but emissaries get to stay here free of charge. Not bad, huh? Jason took a moment to admire the view from the curving windows that lined the walls of the lavish apartment. Like I said, this is your place too now, so make yourself at home. I will, Jack said. At least until they dissect me, anyway. Hey, Jason said. He walked over to Jack and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. That isn't going to happen. Everything's going to be all right, I promise. You're probably programmed to say that. Jason pulled his hand back. I happen to be self-programmed, just like every other mecha in the city. I'm a sentient android with free will. I make up my own mind about things, same as you. Jack could tell he'd hit on a sensitive subject. I'm sorry, Jason. I didn't mean anything by that. I'm just really messed up by this whole Rustov infection thing. Don't be, Jason said. You're going to beat it. How do you know that? Listen to me, Jack, because this is important, Jason began. No one's ever survived a Rustov infection, ever. When a person gets infected, circuits weave their way through bones and tissue, transforming every inch of what was once a person into a Rustov soldier. The body starts to rust and decay, and it takes less than a minute to start happening. No one's ever lasted longer than that. Jason smiled. But look at you. You don't even have the Rustov mark on your eye. Your parasite doesn't control you. You control it. You have to trust me on this, Jack. You're special. You're the only one who seems to think so, Jack said. Mr. Smart and that guy with the sharp fingers really freaked me out yesterday. My face is all over the news. I'm a little worried about what else is going to be out there today. I'm not going to lie to you, Jason said. There are people in the imagination who are going to be suspicious of you. They might want safe to be around or if you're a Rustov spy. Some people are going to wonder if you beat the parasite or if it's just a matter of time before you turn into one of them. How many people? Jack asked. Almost everyone, Jason answered. Jack slumped into a chair. Fantastic. Jack, Jason said. Nothing is going to happen until you go before the inner circle. And you're with me, he added. You should know my systems are equipped to handle 72% of all superhuman attacks we may encounter in the city today. Really? 72%? Jack asked. Why didn't you say so? In that case, I've got nothing to worry about. Jason raised an eyebrow, allowing a slight smile to cross his lips. 72% covers more than you might expect, he said. I'm also 100% fluent in sarcasm, in case you were wondering. Now finish your breakfast. We're going to be late. After breakfast, Jack and Jason rode a lightning fast elevator, 437. Oh my god. Oh my god. Will I just stop? Please. After breakfast, Jack and Jason rode a lightning-fast elevator 437 floors down to the lobby, where the smart cams were anxiously waiting to begin their broadcast day. They didn't get much footage for their trouble. Jason had a hover car ready and waiting. He ushered Jack quickly inside and followed him in, careful not to step on the road. The hover cars in Empire City don't run on gasoline, Jason explained. They have powerful electromagnets that propel them along maglev roads that are charged with the same magnetic currents. If any metal, including what makes up my interior frame, gets too close to the road, it gets magnetically locked down to it until someone comes and cuts the power to the street. Jason tinted the windows to give Jack a break from the smart cams and staring onlookers as they drove through Hightown. To Jack, it looked like the New York City had seen in his comic books, only fast forwarded about 1,000 years into the future. There were buildings stacked on top of other buildings, with streets, bridges, and trains running endlessly through the gaps in between. Hover cars, air speeders, and countless super people crisscrossed paths on their way through jam-packed highways and skyways. Men and women swung through the air, flew across the sky, and jumped off rooftops. A whole family of super speedsters ran alongside Jack's car before veering off in another direction, and Jason drove past three separate superhuman battles along the way to Hero Square. Jack and Jason were just gliding down the street when something thumped on their roof. Jason didn't bat an eye, but Jack certainly did when he looked out the windshield and saw a ninja crawling onto the hood of their car. Jack recognized the colors the ninja wore from his comics. "That's a Sen Clan ninja!" he said, somewhat surprised to hear the words coming out of his mouth. "It certainly is," Jason replied. The ninja asked Jason to speed up, and he was happy to help out. He was chasing two other ninjas wearing white masks with no holes for the nose or mouth. Their form-fitting white suits were as tight as a second skin stretched over their long, stringy bodies and thin, chiseled muscles. Jack recognized them, too. "Are those Ronin assassins?" Jack asked Jason. "Yep. Let me guess. You read about these guys in Dragon Fist comics? Or was it Kung Fu Killers?" "Zen Clan warriors, actually," Jack said. Jack rolled up his window and locked his door. The Ronin always creeped him out whenever they showed up in a story. Undead, soulless ninjas who worked for the evil Shadow Clan Shogun. If Jack had to see them in real life, he was glad that it was in broad daylight with a Zen Clan ninja hot on their tail. Based on what he'd read about them, these Shadow Clan ninjas were not creatures he ever wanted to meet in a dark alley. The Ronin were flipping back and forth between speeding cars as they swiped at the ninja on Jason's hood with side blades and dodged punches and kicks. Not every driver dealt with the distraction as well as Jason seemed to. Up ahead, a hover car swerved to avoid a Ronin's leap, crashing into a truck right in front of Jack and Jason. "Buckle up, Jack," Jason called out. Without slowing the car down, he banked a hard right onto a street that literally ran straight down. Jack's stomach jumped up to his throat as the car made a 90-degree turn and raced down a 100-foot vertical drop. Jack buckled up just in time and screamed like he was on a roller coaster. This was not a steep hill they were driving down. They were driving down the side of a skyscraper. When they reached the bottom, Jason just kept driving like it was no big deal. "All right, excitement's over," Jason said. "Just a random super fight. No big thing. Are you okay?" "Yeah," Jack replied. He paused for a moment. "Can we do that again?" "Maybe later," Jason replied. "Look out your window. I want you to see something." Jason turned into a fenced-off area. "Remember when we were flying in and I mentioned Season Still Park?" Jack nodded and Jason continued. "This is it. Each corner of this park is permanently fixed with the weather of one of the four seasons, so kids can play in whatever weather they want. You'll definitely want to come back here later when we have more time." Jason drove through the snow flurries blowing in winter wind way, past the swimming holes and tire swings in spring falls, the bright autumn leaves dropping around the lakes of fall springs, and finally past the boardwalks and beaches of the summer shore stretch. Jack decided that this was the best park in the world, a playground for all seasons. He wanted to see more, but Jason said he had to get him to the Dedication Day festival by noon. "What's Dedication Day?" Jack asked Jason, with his face pressed up against the car window. "It's where we relight the legendary flame monument and dedicate the city to the memory of the man who saved it during the invasion. The history books of the imagination simultaneously remember it as both our greatest victory and worst defeat." "The legendary flame?" "It's in Hero Square, where the festival is held each year. That's where we're going." "Tell me about the invasion," Jack said. "What happened?" "The Rue stuff happened," Jason replied. "It was 12 years ago today. It was terrible. Without any warning, the entire Rustov Armada appeared one morning and launched a full-scale invasion on the imagination. Thousands died. It Jason paused, as if lost in the memory. It was the first day of a war some people say might never really end. I thought you said we won that battle, Jack said. The superheroes fought back, right? Everyone fought back, Jason said. Even the so-called villains, but there were so many Rustov, and every infected super became another soldier in their army. The battle for Empire City went on for an entire day, and there was one of them. There was one of the invaders who just could not be beaten. Revile. When Jason said Revile's name, he scowled. The loathing and dread in his voice was palpable, synthesized android speech or not. Revile was a Rustov super soldier who simply could not be killed. No matter how many times our side blew him up, he regenerated. He rebuilt himself from scrap again and again and again. In the end, it was only Legend, the strongest of all our heroes, who could fight him. I never heard of Legend, Jack said. He was the strongest hero? Jason nodded. Tougher than Captain Courage? Jack pressed. Captain Courage? Jason laughed. Come on, Jack, he added, shaking his head. Captain Courage is just a comic book character. Legend was real. Jack didn't quite understand why a real-life Captain Courage was any crazier than real-life Ronin assassins, but he didn't interrupt Jason. When all the other supers fell, Legend fought Revile by himself, Jason continued. He never gave up. Even when he knew he couldn't defeat Revile, he just kept going. How did he win? The legendary sacrifice, Jason said in a reverent voice. Revile engaged a self-destruct mechanism, what the Rustov called the Omega Protocol. He was going to detonate his nuclear power source and blow up the entire city. A cheap and cowardly way to end the battle, but it would have worked. It would have worked if not for Legend, that is. He grabbed Revile and flew him straight into the Rustov mothership, right into the infinite warp core engine. The explosion filled the sky, destroying the mothership, Revile, and any hope the Rustov had of winning the Battle of Empire City. And destroying Legend too? Jack guessed. Jason nodded. We won the battle, but it cost us the greatest hero the world has ever known. Today we dedicate the city to his memory and celebrate lasting another year in our war against the Rustov. Jack leaned back in his seat and exhaled deeply. It was quite a story, but as he turned it over in his head, something about it didn't quite fit. I don't get it, Jack said. How did the Rustov find the imagination? Did someone take them here like you took me? Yes, Jason said bitterly. A traitor. The great collaborator. A traitor? Did they ever catch him? Jason thought about it for a moment. That all depends on who you ask, the emissary said as he pulled the car up to the edge of Heroes Square. We're here. Jason got out of the car and Jack hopped out after him. Jack's curiosity about the great collaborator was quickly sidetracked by the spectacle of Hero Square. Excuse me. Sorry, hold up. Checking stuff. Okay. The square was gigantic, a gargantuan plaza built from granite and marble, at least 1,000 feet wide and packed with people. Humans, aliens, superhumans, and non-supers, as if all of Empire City had turned out for the Dedication Day festival. There were food vendors, candy stands, and street performers scattered everywhere, combining to create a dizzying array of scrumptious smells and flying acrobatics. Jack and Jason passed beneath a colossal arch and out onto the animated plaza. An immense classic stone building lined the perimeter of the square with arches, pillars, and a museum-like stateliness. Floating over a pedestal in the center of it all was a giant iron sphere with several large rings swinging around it like a gyroscope. Jason explained that this was the heart of Empire City. The boroughs of the diverse metropolis surrounded the square like members of a dysfunctional but happy family. To Jack's right, the ancient walls of Aragog stood strong like a fortress against the modern era. Jack spotted chivalrous knights, fair maidens, and noble monarchs gathered behind Gothic castle windows. Hundreds of provincial townsfolk lined the tops of the stone walls, standing on every ledge and peeking through every nook and cranny. It was like a place that time forgot. On Jack's left was the exact opposite, the space-age borough of Galaxis. Alien families from across the universe were huddled together on the roofs of orb-shaped buildings and on the decks of glistening starships. Jack looked up past the boroughs of Karatica, Cognito, and Machina. He looked on to the towering spires of Hightown. The skyscrapers were all built into the hills of the island. From Hero Square, Jack could see the entire city. Behind Jack, a stone bridge ran through the square, past the edge of the island, and out over the bottomless waterfalls. At the end of the bridge stood the statue of a noble hero, reaching out to the city with a tiny blue flame burning in his palm. Is that legend? Jason finished. The man who saved the imagination from the invaders. Invaders like the one hiding inside of me, Jack thought. The very idea made his skin crawl. An alien parasite somewhere inside his body living off him. That wasn't even the worst of it either. The worst was that it might one day take him over. It was exactly what everyone in Hero Square was worried about. As Jason led Jack through the crowd, the reaction that Jack got was pretty much the one he expected. His face was already famous all over Empire City, and not in a good way. Music grinded to a halt and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. People were shrinking back, mumbling to one another about the infected boy and giving Jack dirty looks. Even more were shouting angrily at Jack, calling him rusty. The smart cams caught up to Jack and broadcasted live coverage on the news nets like reality TV. Jack could tell that nobody wanted him there. They were afraid of him and what he represented. Part of him had to wonder if they were right to feel that way, if it really was only a matter of time before he turned into a rooster. He shut the thought out of his mind. He had more immediate concerns, like the inner circle and the mob of people outside the sphere. The crowd's fear made it dangerous, and Jason's assurance that he could fend off 72% of any trouble was not very reassuring. To make matters worse, Jack recognized the uniforms of several more Peacemaker super teams working security, scaring people back behind dotted lines. If the crowd decided to go after Jack, the Peacemakers were more likely to join the mob than stop it. Jack grew more nervous until he saw a familiar blue face in the crowd. Blue walked out to meet Jack and Jason, flanked by several large members of his police unit. They were all part of the Brute Force, a squad of Empire City's toughest super cops. They escorted Jack safely through the mob and deposited him at a special VIP area directly under the Black Iron Sphere. Standing in the VIP area were two other children Jack's age. The first, a girl with liquid metal skin, shrieked when she saw Jack and turned into something resembling a puddle of mercury. A boy, dressed in the garb of a young squire from Veragog, actually drew two swords on Jack before Jason stepped in to stay his hand. Easy, Scarin, we're all friends here, Jason said to the boy. The young swordsman muttered something decidedly unfriendly and skulked off on his own. What'd I tell you? Jason said to Jack. No worries. Yeah, we're doing great, Jack replied, pointing up at a Newsnet screen that read, Rustov Spawn terrorizes Hero Square. Jason grumbled at the headline and led Jack to the marble pedestal. They walked up a staircase that was carved into the sides and stood directly beneath the sphere. Here we go. Here we go, Jason said. A moment later, the platform began to rise up toward the iron globe above them. The sphere's swirling rings whizzed by over their heads, and Jack thought about just how much it would hurt to get hit with them. He also took note of the solid iron frame of the fast approaching orb. Shouldn't that thing have a door? Jack asked. A ring swung by, inches from the top of Jack and Jason's heads. Jack ducked, missing whatever Jason said in reply as they continued rising toward the sphere. There was no door opening up that Jack could see. They were going to slam right into the bottom. Another ring flew by, but closer and faster this time. Jack and Jason were almost at the sphere, and just as Jack was sure they were going to be crushed against the bottom, they passed right through it. The iron surface gave way and became soft metal that ran over Jack's skin like melted chocolate, only without the stickiness. Only without the stickiness. The iron surface gave way and became soft metal that ran over Jack's skin like melted chocolate, only without the stickiness. Jack passed through the sphere unharmed and emerged inside the sanctum sanctorum of the inner circle. As the metal exterior of the sphere slid off his skin, Jack looked around. This was the place where his fate would be decided. The rest of his life, however long or short it might be, would hinge on the next few minutes in this great round room. And now, an intermission. When we come back, we will be reading Chapter 6, The Inner Circle.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud, he's got radioactive blood. Can he swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there goes the Spider-Man. In the chill of the night at the scene of the crime, like a streak of light he arrives just in time. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, wealth and fame he ignores, fortune is his reward. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
Welcome back from the intermission. We will now be continuing our reading, Chapter 6, The Inner Circle. On the outside, the sphere of the inner circle was only about 10 or 15 feet across. On the inside, the sphere was bigger than a football stadium. There was enough room to fit 50,000 people or more, and the only thing more striking than the vast space hidden inside the sphere was its complete and utter emptiness. Jack and Jason were alone, standing in a pit, and looking up at a table that ran around them in a circle. The pit wasn't very deep, but it was still an intimidating spot to be in. Jack was scared, though he trusted that Jason knew what he was doing. He was pretty sure he did, anyway. 6 separate tunnel openings lined the walls of the sphere. Each one had the name of an Empire City borough inscribed above it, and a path leading to a seat at the tribunal. Jason explained that this was where the inner circle met, although it was more like the half circle these days. There were supposed to be 6 circlemen, one person elected from each borough. When all 6 were there, they were said to be at full circle, and could choose a 7th member to join them. Right now, there are 2 empty seats, Jason explained, pointing up toward the empty chairs. That 7th seat once belonged to Legend, then the seat next to it, the one from Cognito, belonged to Stendival. There was that name again. Jack remembered Jason mentioning Stendival's name back when Jonas Smart was talking about executions and dissections. Jack's reaction to the name must have struck Jason as odd. So, you don't know Stendival? Jason probed. Do you, Jack? Jack's eyebrows tied themselves up into knots. Know him? He asked. I just got here. I don't know anyone but you and Blue. Right, of course, Jason said, clearly disappointed. It's just that no one's seen him in 12 years, and I thought maybe. Never mind. Who was he? Jack asked. He was the circleman from Cognito. That's what we call them, he added, gesturing up toward the seats. He held his seat for almost 500 years. He was a real hero, like Legend, and he was a good friend. 500 years? Jack asked. How'd he live so long? It had something to do with his powers, but I'm not exactly sure. Why hasn't anyone replaced him? Jack asked. He was there so long, Jason said. After 500 years, he was more than just a man. He was an institution. No one could replace him. No one wanted to try to fill his shoes. Also, you have to understand, Cognito is an odd part of town. The whole place is one big hideout. People go there to disappear, not run for elections. If they wanted to be in the public eye, they wouldn't be incognito. Jack thought cognito sounded like a good place for someone like him to live. What's it like there? He asked Jason. I don't really know. Without Stendivol, cognito's more mysterious than ever, and in the inner circle, well, it isn't. It just isn't the same. I can tell you this. If Stendivol were here, we wouldn't even be talking about anyone dissecting you. Jason had a concerned look about him that he couldn't quite hide entirely. He didn't come right out and say it, but Jack got the feeling that with Stendivol gone, anything could happen. Jack gulped as the clock struck noon. It was time. Jack heard footsteps in the tunnels, and the members of the inner circle began to enter the sphere. The first to arrive was a giant man dressed like a medieval swordsman with a thick, bushy beard and a fur cloak. Jason whispered that the brute was the warrior king of Varagog village. Jack recognized him instantly as Hovarth, the barbarian warrior from his comic books. Holy cow, that's Hovarth! Jack said. Hovarth looked down on him with a suspicious eye and rested a giant sword and battle axe on the table. Next, a man with silver skin and a bright blue supersuit flew into the room. He took his seat at the Galaxis chair. Jack knew who he was, too. That's Prime! Jack exclaimed. Right again, Jason said. I don't believe this, Jack said. He's one of my favorite heroes. One of ours, too, Jason said. He's the Circleman of Galaxis. He's also one of the last Valorians in the galaxy, which is something you may or may not have read in your comic books. After Prime, a mechanical orb the size of a grapefruit whizzed into the room. The orb settled by an empty chair and then projected a beam of golden light that formed a shimmering image of the most beautiful woman Jack had ever seen. She looked like a backup character from a sci-fi comic book Jack liked. Is that Virtua? He asked. Jason looked at Jack, a little surprised. Just how many comic books have you read, Jack? He asked. A lot, Jack answered. Jason told Jack he was correct, and that Virtua was the new Circle Woman of Machina. Like Jason, she was a sentient program, a hard light hollow projection of a gorgeous artificial intelligence. She was followed by another familiar face, Chi, the Circleman of Karateka and leader of the Zen Clan ninjas. Chi walked slowly toward a seat and then flipped through the air to land in it without making the slightest sound. He looked just like he had in Jack's comics. He was an Asian man with snow white skin, wearing a sleeveless blue karate robe over a black supersuit. He carried himself with a quiet, dignified authority, a dangerous ninja wrapped in a cloak of tranquility. Finally, the circle was joined by Jonas Smart, who also required no introduction. The inner circle was filled with heroes from Jack's comic books. He hoped that would work in his favor, but had no idea how accurate the portrayal of these heroes in his comic books really was. Jack looked from face to face. Virtua showed signs of pity, Hovarth eyed him with contempt, and Smart's expression conveyed outright disgust. Prime looked on Jack with a stern military gaze, and Chi's face was impossible to read. Call me crazy, but I don't think any of these guys wanted you to bring me here, Jack said to Jason. Jason stared at Stendival's empty seat. He opened his mouth to say something, but stopped when Jonas Smart knocked on the table, calling the meeting to order. Shall we begin? Smart asked the rest of the circle, leaving Jack to wonder what Jason had started to say. The reason I called this meeting is standing before you now, Smart said, walking around the circle like a lecturing professor. Throughout the ages, the people of the imagination have been blessed to live in the best of all possible worlds. As we in the inner circle all know, that is no accident. We have fought to keep things this way, and paid for our perfection with the blood of heroes. That fight continues today. Our world is under siege. His face turned sour. 12 years ago, we were invaded by an enemy who has targeted us as the next stop.
on an intergalactic feast. Invaders who go from planet to planet, eating up all life and natural resources before moving on to the next target. One needs only to look upon the once green planet of Mars to understand the full scope of the devastation that the Rustov leave in their wake.
Jonas, Prime interrupted.
We were all there. The whole of this circle fought in the battles. What is the point of this history lesson?
Hovarth answered for Smart, speaking in a thick Scottish accent.
I think the point, Prime, is that if we're not careful, history might repeat itself.
Thank you, Hovarth, Smart said.
That is exactly right. The Rustov attacked us here first, knowing full well that if the imagination were to fall, there would be no one on this planet strong enough to stop them. These are dangerous times. The idealist traditions of our great nation notwithstanding, we do not need to be tempting fate by bringing new people into our land, people we do not know or trust beyond the shadow of a doubt.
Smart pointed to Jack.
Emissary Knight has crossed the line by bringing this creature, this infected child here. Knight would tell you this boy is somehow resisting the Rustov technovirus. What I see is a Rustov sleeper agent brought here by a mecha, no less. Emissary Knight expects us to stand by idly while he sneaks an infiltrator in to infect our prefect. Impossible. I want this boy terminated and sent to my lab immediately, and Emissary Knight to be dismantled pending a full investigation.
You can't do that, Jack yelled. Smart shot down a fierce look.
Emissary Knight, you will instruct your charge to be silent, or
the boy has a right to defend himself, Jason cut in.
And so do I, for that matter.
Jonas, please, Virtua agreed. Emissary Knight's loyalties are well known. Let the boy speak. I, for one, would like to hear what he has to say. She and Prime agreed, and Smart sat down and sulked. What should I say? Jack whispered to Jason.
Just tell them the truth, Jason said. Tell them who you are. You've got nothing to hide.
Jack swallowed hard and looked up at the inner circle. Smart's words had cut him pretty deep, but Jack could at least take comfort in the knowledge that he wasn't a Rustov sleeper agent. He also thought about what Jason had said earlier. It didn't matter that no one else had ever survived the Rustov infection. He could beat it. He was special. He had to be to make it this far, didn't he? Jack wasn't so sure. He didn't feel very special. His stomach felt hollow, like an old dead tree. He could barely breathe, let alone speak. Hi, my name is Jack Blake, he squeaked out, sounding more like a question than a statement. I'm 12 years old, and Jack paused, unsure what to say next. I wasn't really ready for all this, he admitted. I don't know anything about invasions. I don't know anything about Rustov spies. I don't even know my real name. I just know that I'm not a Rustov. Jack was finding his voice. I know it's only my word against Mr. Smart's, and you don't have any reason to trust me. You don't know me, but I know you. I read all about all of you back where I came from. You're my heroes. Heroes wouldn't go through with something like this. The heroes I read about would give me a chance. Because I'm not a Rustov, I'm just me. I'm just a kid who would really love to not be dissected. Jason patted Jack on the back. Well said, he muttered. The panel stared back at Jack with curious eyes.
What do you mean you don't know your name, boy?
Hovarth asked. Jack shrugged. I don't know anything about who I am, he said. I only found out yesterday that I was born here. I have this birth certificate. We were hoping to find out more, but my file was ruined. Jack took out his infected file and placed it on the table above him. I'm not looking to make any trouble for anyone. Really, I'm not. The members passed Jack's file around the table, examining it. Hovarth held it with only 2 fingers, keeping it as far away from himself as possible before passing it to Prime. Prime squinted at the file but didn't seem to make sense of it.
Jonas, is there no other way to get any information about this boy's past?
He asked.
No other way to find out who he really is? He may be telling the truth. That information is immaterial. He is infected, Smart replied. As for his records, he continued with a patronizing tenor, I'll spare you the history lesson and simply remind you that countless records were lost in the invasion, along with a great many lives. His family is most likely dead.
Jonas, Virtua scolded, don't say such things.
We can hardly assume otherwise, Smart replied. The smart cams have been constantly broadcasting his image since he arrived, and no one has claimed him.
That's hardly surprising, given your coverage of his arrival, Virtua countered. Rustav's spawn terrorizes Hero Square? A bit sensational, I think.
It's the truth, Smart said. This boy is a danger to us all. I refuse to take any chances with him. Lives are at stake.
Including his life, Jason said. He's one of us. He has powers and he's immune to the Rustav infection. They try to kill him because of it. When I found Jack, he had just destroyed a Rustav parasoldier. A surprised murmur ran through the panel. Prime tilted his head, clearly impressed.
Is this true?
He asked. When Jack nodded, Prime seemed pleased.
Just what are your powers, young man?
He doesn't know what, Jason began. I control machines, Jack interrupted.
You what?
Jason asked. I figured it out last night, Jack quickly whispered to Jason. I was going to tell you, but I didn't want to freak you out. You know, seeing as how you're technically a... Don't worry about me, tell them, Jason exclaimed. I control machines, Jack repeated, turning back to Prime and the rest of the circle. I don't mean to do it. It just happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but that's got to be it. It's the only thing that makes sense. Machines react to my feelings, my mood. Yesterday, I was really excited and drove a huge boat through a crazy storm to get here. I'd never even been on a boat before, but it worked with no problem. In the Hall of Records, I had all this nervous energy, and suddenly Jason had a glitch. And before that, Jack paused and thought about the events of the previous day in a new light. Before that, I was really scared, and yeah, I'm pretty sure I used a power generator to blow up a Rustov parasoldier. The inner circle whispered excitedly among themselves.
Destroying a Rustov parasoldier, Prime repeated. Impressive for a boy your age. More than impressive.
It's simply unheard of, Virtua added. Your powers must be mighty indeed.
It makes sense, Jason said, seizing the moment. It makes perfect sense. Let's say Jack controls machines. The Rustov are living machines. If his power is automatic, that has to be how he survived infection this long. His natural instinct to survive is keeping the Rustov in check. That's how he controls the Rustov inside him.
But he doesn't control his power, Hovarth argued. It changes with his moods. What if the Rustov adapts when he relaxes? Gains the upper hand. That's why Jack belongs here, where we can teach him to control his abilities, Jason argued.
It's why Jack is dangerous, Smart countered. For all you know, this boy is controlling you right now. He could be using you to slip past our defenses so he can call back the Rustov Armada.
Smart turned to his fellow circlemen.
This is all the more reason why Emissary Knight has to be dismantled, if only temporarily. I want to run a full diagnostic on him. He's not himself. I'm not questioning his loyalty, it's this child. He needs to be Smart stopped himself. He needs to be put to sleep so that we can end this threat. Then I can dissect his body and examine both his biological organs and any technological tissue. It's the only way to harvest his power so that we can all resist the Rustov infection. That way, everyone can benefit.
Everyone except me, Jack said. They're not actually going to do this, are they? He asked Jason. Jason looked over the inner circle's faces one by one, trying to guess their feelings on the matter.
This is the imagination, Jason pleaded. Here, of all places, we should be able to find an alternative to this. I know what I'm doing, and I'm not being controlled by Jack. So you say,
Hovarth interjected.
Surely, it is better to err on the side of caution, though. Not if it means dismantling me and killing this boy, Jason said. We've already sacrificed so much to the Rustov. We've all but closed our borders. Now we're going to kill the people who come here? You're the one who brought him here, Emissary Knight, Smart noted. His blood is on your hands. Harming this boy won't serve this city, Jason replied. It will betray everything the imagination stands for. If you do this, the Rustov have already won. On the contrary, Smart reasoned, legend's sacrifice against the Rustov proves that the suffering of one individual can, in fact, serve the greater good. The logical conclusion is that the more suffering we see, the better things are actually getting.
That makes no sense, Jack objected.
Child, don't tax your feeble mind trying to understand why I'm right. Just accept that I am, Smart said.
No one else argued with him. Jack was suddenly worried. Coming into the sphere, Jason had made it seem like Smart's whole plan to dissect him was too crazy to take seriously. Now it looked like a real possibility.
Enough of this, Smart continued. I move that we vote on this matter now and then proceed to the festival outside. I have a question first,
Cheese said softly, speaking up for the first time. Smart blew a sharp snort out of his air. Blah, blah, blah. Smart blew a sharp snort of air out of his nostrils and frowned.
How nice of you to join us, Chi, he quipped.
Chi opted not to dignify Smart's barb with a response. He directed his attention to Jack and Jason.
How exactly did you find this boy, Emissary Knight?
Blah, blah, blah.
How exactly did you find this boy, Emissary Knight? What led you to him?
It's part of my job to seek out gifted ones, Circleman Chi, Jason replied. Generally, when dealing with power levels like Jack's, they're impossible to miss.
Yes, but that wasn't the case here, was it?
Chi guessed.
I reviewed the smart cam footage from the Hall of Records. You told the customs clerk that you were encouraged to bring this boy back. What did you mean by that?
Jason hesitated but was compelled to speak.
2 nights ago, I received a letter that told me about Jack. It was from somebody important, somebody we all trust. He told me where to look for Jack. I followed the directions, and there Jack was. Who was this letter from? Who was this letter from?
She pressed, digging deeper. Jason pulled an orange envelope from his jacket pocket and held it in the air.
It was from Stendeville,
he said. The entire circle let out a collective but no one was more shocked than Jack. A letter from Stendeville, the man who had been missing since the Battle of Empire City, written about him? Smart wasted no time in casting further suspicion on the matter.
I can see why Emissary Knight didn't bring this up himself. That letter was probably sent by the Rustov.
The letter was passed around the table, and the circle erupted with arguments debating its legitimacy. All of the circlemen were up in arms, quarreling, all except for Chi, who somehow maintained his zen-like calm.
Thank you, Emissary Knight,
Chi said peacefully.
Jonas, I agree. We are ready for a vote. I invite you to begin. I intend to,
Smart said. He stood up, clearly upset by the Stendable business. He cleared his throat, then straightened his jacket and hair, composing himself like a lawyer, readying his closing statements.
Even if you don't believe this child is a Rustov conspirator,
Smart began.
no one can argue that he is not infected. Our laws demand that we terminate him before he becomes one of the Rustov himself. It is unfortunate, but there is no other possible future for him. Any attempt to forcibly remove a Rustov parasite has resulted in the death of the host in every case. On the motion to have my peacemakers execute the infected child and donate his body to science, I vote yes.
Smart said, unflinchingly certain of his own infallibility. As Jack listened to Smart pontificate before the circle, he was floored by the man's ice-blooded nature, as well as the absolute pride he seemed to take in that nature. Jonas Smart wore his lack of a heart on his sleeve.
I might add that I resent Emissary Knight's tactics,
Smart added.
invoking the name of Stendable in the hopes that it might sway this panel's ruling. You dishonor his memory, sir.
Smart pointed an accusing finger in Jason's direction.
But perhaps this is part of the enemy's plan. A mysterious letter written in the hand of an old friend. Someone whom we all miss, whom we all trust. But a letter telling you to bring an infected child into the imagination. It troubles me that you did not find this suspicious, Emissary Knight. I further move that the emissary should be dismantled immediately for a full system scan by Smart Core engineers. Circleman Prime, you are next.
All eyes turned to Prime, who was pondering the issue with a very serious look on his face.
As you all know, the Rustov destroyed my home world and killed nearly everyone I ever loved,
Prime said, rising to his feet.
And despite everything they have done to me, I still say they will find no more ardent foe than you, Jonas Smart. You are willing to kill children to defeat them.
He shook his head.
I will not vote to kill this boy because we are afraid of what he might become. If he turns or corrupts the emissary, I will be ready. I am a Valorian soldier, and the sons of valor know no fear. I vote no on both counts.
Jack breathed a sigh of relief as Prime returned to his seat. The vote moved on to Hovarth of Veragog. Hovarth picked up his sword and stared down the blade, examining it.
I'm sorry, lad,
he said with a distant look.
I mourn the loss of all who fall prey to the Rustov, I truly do. But in Veragog, we trust no machines. It's only a matter of time before you become one.
Jack's face fell.
Take heart, young fellow,
Hovarth urged.
if what they say is true. If we can discover a cure to the Rustov virus by studying your body, why, you'll be remembered as a hero,
he promised with great enthusiasm.
In Veragog, we ask nothing more from life. On both counts, I vote yes.
Hovarth's vote made the score now 2-1 in favor of executing Jack and dismantling Jason. Jack's heart pounded in his chest and his mind raced. What would he do if he lost the vote? There was no way for him to escape the sphere. He was trapped, and one more vote against him would seal his fate. Cheese stood at his seat, his expressionless face hiding any emotion. Jack fought the urge to hyperventilate. He was just about ready to really freak out.
I vote no,
Cheese said firmly.
Jack is an innocent child. Emissary Knight has done nothing wrong. No other explanation is required.
Jack exhaled deeply and smiled up at Chi, mouthing the words, "Thank you." He wasn't out of the woods yet, though. It was time for the tiebreaker. He held his breath for the final vote.
It seems that it is up to you now, Virtua,
Smart said fiendishly.
a word of advice before you decide this matter. Do not forget it was your predecessor, the android Silico, who is revealed to be the traitor of this circle, the great collaborator responsible for the Rustov invasion.
Virtual looked daggers back at Smart. "I haven't forgotten," she said. "I haven't ever forgotten. What exactly do you mean bringing this up to me now?" Smart put up a finger.
Think for a moment. A vote for this child could be interpreted by some as the behavior of a Rustov conspirator. A vote to protect the infected, to protect the Mecca that brought him here. It all reeks of more traitors and machina. Tread carefully, or I might be forced to send peacemaker teams in to sweep your burrow for Rustov agents all over again.
Virtua's hollow image flickered as she let out a startled gasp. Prime pounded the table, his fist crackling with radiant energy.
You go too far, Jonas Smart,
The Valorian bellowed.
the public would demand it,
Smart retorted.
Don't subject your people to that over this boy.
He told Virtua.
Who knows who might get caught in the crossfire?
"That's not fair," Jack yelled. "He's bullying her. You can't bully her like that."
This is blackmail,
Jason agreed.
Here, I'm merely offering my opinion.
Smart said, waving his hands.
By all means, Virtua, vote your conscience. We are all equals in the inner circle.
He added with a smug grin. Virtua looked trapped, and Jack could tell she was conflicted. The look on Jason's face didn't do anything to put him at ease either. Jack could see that Virtua wanted to vote in their favor, but the looming shadow of doubt cast by talk of the great collaborator worried her, and that worried Jack. If one more vote went the wrong way, he would be good as dead, and Jason would be spare parts.
There is no cause for concern, she announced. I am sure your counsel is appreciated, Jonas, but the final decision will not fall to Virtua's shoulders alone. You see, it is not yet her turn to vote.
Chi motioned to an empty chair between himself and Virtua, the chair that had once belonged to Stendavel.
You're not serious, Smart said, incredulous.
You're not serious, Smart said, incredulous. The circlemen of Varagog roared with laughter.
Che, Stendavel's been missing for years. Do you think he's going to come here today simply because the emissary got a mysterious letter? Jonas is right. Surely the letter was sent by the Rustov.
No, it wasn't, actually, Cheese stated, his voice cool and even.
You know this for truth. How?
Chi reached into his robe.
Because 12 years ago, Stendavel sent me a letter too. He wrote to tell me that on this day, he was going to be 15 minutes late for a meeting concerning one Jack Blank.
The room fell silent as Chi dropped another, much older, orange envelope onto the table.
Imagine that,
he said with a smile. Jonas Smart picked up the letter and read it silently to himself. The clock on the wall struck 12:15 p.m., and Jack saw all the color drain from Smart's face. A gust of wind blew through the room. Above Jack's head, tiny red energy particles swirled in the air, spinning outward from a teeny tiny dot into a large ring. A humming sound grew, and the room shook. A radiant orange-white light flashed out, blinding Jack. When Jack's sight returned a moment later, a man was floating in the center of the room with his legs folded beneath him. He had dark brown skin and red lines painted on his smooth, bald head. The entire inner circle, whom Jack imagined saw the impossible happen every day, fell speechless. What voice did I have for him? It was like,
Hello again, young friend.
something like that.
Hello again, young friend.
The man in orange said to Jack.
Blah, 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 blah. Hello again, young friend.
The man in orange said to Jack.
Am I glad to see you,
Jason said. Yeah, Jack agreed. It's good to see you again, Stendable.
And that is the end of chapter 6.
Next time, we'll be reading chapters 7 through 8, starting with chapter 7, The School of Thought.